Hi, party people. Welcome to Black Genius, brought to you by NorPress. I'm Lola de Shiambola, your host for today. And I have with me Tiffany Norwood. Tiffany Norwood is a legend. you haven't heard of her, now you know. Tiffany is one of the pioneers of the dot-com era. She raised almost $700 million back in the 90s for satellite technology. Like, we're talking pre-XM radio, we're talking Google blowing up, like just early transformative stuff. She launched the first satellite in South Africa for Nelson Mandela at his request. And she's been mentoring me over the last several months. I just so fortunate to know Tiffany. She has validated my existence by encouraging me to dream and imagine and go all in. So I'm so happy, so proud to have you here, Tiffany. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone around the world. I'm always thinking global and talking global. So I love what you're doing with this show and what the mission is for Noir Labs, the film festival, everything, the Black liberation, although we'll talk about that later, about whether we need to be liberated at all. And all in all, I'm just happy to be here with this we. We're talking about some of the things I've done. I mean, I've done a lot of things over the past 30 plus years, and I'll say it was always part of a we. It wasn't just me alone, and that's what makes it extra special and extra meaningful for me, enjoyable too. I enjoyed every single satellite launch and technology created, and MP3 collaborated on, and healthcare clinic built, and it goes on and on and on because of the we. So thank you, my we, for having me here this morning.
I'm so honored to be part of your we and everything that you were saying. I want to make sure you guys know that Tiffany is a coder artist. So it's very rare not only to find engineers and engineering, talent that is also artistic and creative and that embraces that side of themselves. And so that for me was always my challenge. So Tiffany, having studied electrical engineering and getting her MBA, but also being this creative storyteller. And even you have some visual art that you do, correct?
Yeah, I do visual art. I'm a painter.
You're about to release an album. Is that a secret?
And also I'm a musician and a poet. So a lot of people don't know that side of me because I haven't played for such a long time. But yeah, about 6 or 7 different instruments, with my best one being electric bass.
Wow. I cannot wait to hear. So when we talk about genius, clearly, and I love that we had this conversation months ago and you were talking about how, you do your yoga, you have your playlist in the morning. So there's the yoga, there's the meditation, there's the affirmations, the prayers, all of it. And that for me, you said you spent a nice chunk of time in the morning, just getting your mind ready. And I just want you to say something about that because, I was doing the same thing and I thought I was wasting time. I thought I was doing too much. And you said that and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Who is this woman?
Yeah, no, it's not a waste of time. It's a way to create time. And, reality itself starts in the imagination. And it's extended with narrative and story and then action. And so if your mind isn't right, then nothing's right. In reverse, if everything else is wrong and your mind is right, then everything is still right. Like if you think about Hawking, right? Like he lost all function of his body, but his mind was still right, and he still had this impact on the world. So mind and soul first and foremost. Well, soul first, mind second, body third. And the great thing is if you can bring it all together. So yeah, I spend quite a few hours early in the morning focusing on body, mind, and soul through physical activity. And my favorite is Bikram yoga, like intense hot yoga or Baptiste, but hot. So I have a small room in my home that is I keep hot and humid.
You turned a den into your own private yoga studio.
Yeah, and thank God, because it was meant to be something on occasion, which I then never use. But then with the pandemic and having to stay at home, it's up my practice around that. And I think, we can talk about this later, how I don't want anyone to get sick or die, and I have family members, fighting it right now. But in a lot of ways, the pandemic is such a great opportunity for us as individuals to get things right. But yeah, no, even this morning, I spent about 2.5 hours in that space between yoga and meditating and creating. And I feel wholeheartedly that I expand time because of that, because the clarity that I have and the effectiveness when I'm doing things. It's not about efficiency, it's about effectiveness.
Expanding time. You just have all these like golden quotes. We're gonna publish an article of Tiffany Norwood quotes because you just be dropping the nuggets. And so you're also the founder of Tribetan, which I didn't say before. Can you talk a little bit about what you do at Tribetan?
Yeah, so Tribetan, our tagline is the science of turning imagination into reality. And basically it goes to, everyone as a creator and upping entrepreneurship and innovation skills and mindsets for everyone, and for it to be brought into every sector of society. A new form of literacy, the way we think of reading, writing, and math. I think for the future success are those that are able to be creators. And what I mean by that is those that have ideas and take their imagination seriously and can, as a first step, bring them into reality for other people to see, use, or be impacted by, which is what entrepreneurs do all the time. And I've been predominantly an inventor and innovator entrepreneur. So I have taken my imagination seriously my whole entire life. But yeah, so Tribetan is about bringing the entrepreneur and innovator skill set to everyone, every sector of society. I want that skill set to be as well known as reading, writing, and math. I think it will be as important as learning how to read and write was, say, 4 or 5 generations ago. As we were transferring from like an agriculture-based society to an industrial and information age-based society. And now as we go into the future, it's like, well, what's the next thing? What can't be automated, right? Because automation has been we're in an automation society, right? And one thing that can never be automated or replicated is the creativity of the human being. It's bar none. Even, I'll debate my fellow artificial intelligence, because I've written a lot of algorithms, and the algorithm is only as smart as the last person or group of people that have worked.
Wow.
Like literally, you cannot touch God's work. And so I want people to take, their imagination more seriously. And then the Tribetan method is a simple 7-step process for turning that imagination into reality. So we can, right now, I say, let's reimagine everything. So we can use it to innovate education, medicine, science, government, you name it.
And this is the right time for doing that. We have this huge opportunity right now to just create the world that we want. So I want to just say what's up to our viewers. We have Raquel watching. We have Desiree. If anybody else who's watching, say what's up, drop an emoji in the chat. If there's anything that you're trying to manifest, or that, if you're an entrepreneur and there's anything that you're working on that you'd like to share with the community, drop that in the chat. Okay, so Tiffany, I want to go back to like your first.
Can I add one thing that we're going to be releasing next Friday? I should have started a wait list. So you're going to have afternotes, right?
We're going to have what?
Like afternotes, like liner notes that I can drop in. So I'll drop a link to be able to get on the wait list for it. But one of the things that we rolled out this year is something that I call IMSIS, and it's a mindset simulator, imagination stimulator. And I've been rolling it out so far. 100 people have used it around the world, and we're expanding it. And it's about basically expanding your imagination and creating a simulation experience as an innovator, so that you can take, and what you'll take is some dream or goal you have that you want to manifest it, and run it through the practice that you do with the simulator.
See, God's work. You can't touch God's work. Yes, I put the website in the chat, tribetan.com, for people to learn, for you guys to learn more about Tiffany. Okay, but let's go back to your first invention. You talk a lot about the backpack. Was the backpack your first patent?
Yeah, so that was my first invention when I was a teenager. Myself, Philip, was one of my good friends at Cornell. I went to Cornell undergrad. And we're actually still good friends today. So he had sent me some crazy picture from the UK about a nude man wearing masks over a certain body part last night. He lives in London. He lives near you. So we're still really good friends. We obviously, neither one of us have grown up since we were teenagers.
It should be.
And then also Anthony and Oliver. So the name of the company was Topac for Tiffany, Oliver, Philip, Anthony, and then the Q was for quality, because we gave a lifetime guarantee. But really it was to rhyme with backpack. And it was the first ever one-strap backpack. And it's that design where it comes as a triangle and tapers into a single strap that clicks on either side.
So what year was this? What year was this patent put in?
We submitted, I want to say in 87. So I was like 19 when we did. And when we got it, oh God, this is so long ago. It was like,
you're not 19 now? You look like you're 19 now.
We can also talk about like when you're creating and sort of living the life that you're meant to live, the expansion of time as it relates to aging, because that's also something that I started experimenting with at 32. And so I sort of still have the look of that age frame, like the mid 30s, late 30s, as I got into the groove with that.
All right.
But yeah, so yeah, and we had the patent issued, I want to say in 1990 or something. So yeah, I was like 22 or.
So how did that idea come about? I want to go younger and get into your childhood, but how did the idea for the backpack come about?
Well, it's like most things from when I was a child all the way to today. It would be something either I imagined or someone else imagined. In this case, it was Philip and Anthony first had it, and I was working in London at the time, in the city. Their equivalent of Wall Street, and Philip and I met up for like dinner or lunch or something, and he said, "Oh, what about this? The fact that we sling our backpack over one shoulder. I saw something that could address that," and we started talking from there and got super excited. Then met up with Anthony, who was from Ireland. He came down to London, and already I was like creating stuff. That was my first time ever out of the country. It was 1987. First time. And immediately, because I'd already created things, did businesses when I was even younger than that. And I think Philip knew that. And I was also in entrepreneurship at Cornell. I was the first cohort, which we started that in 1985. It was a loose thing, but Cornell had sort of thrown a stake in the ground, and there was like me and I want to say like 5 other guys. I know Michael, but I can't remember the other guys. I think I was also the only Black person in it, so like the only woman, the only Black person. And so I was known for being that inventor, innovator, creative type. And so we took it from there. We brought it back to the US, and simultaneously while doing university and all these other sort of things, we started the company.
Wow. Okay. So we're gonna go back and then come forward. What was your first business?
You mean like very, very first, including
Mhm.
things that weren't incorporated or anything?
Oh, absolutely. Even selling lemonade. What were you
Yeah,
doing as a kid?
so I would do the lemonade thing. I would make greeting cards. This will sound gross, but I love like farming and gardening. And so I would take the seeds from things and clean them and dry them up and have these like bespoke seed packets that I would sell. And then where I started making, also I did junior achievement, like when I was 13, which was like this thing we could practice mainly for high schoolers. So most people were 17 and 18, but I'd already sold seeds and stuff. So I was like, I'm ready at 13.
Wait, I want to know more about the bespoke seeds. Who did you sell them to and how? How did you sell them?
Yeah, and so, even now I love my little urban farming. I live in the city. I was always like, you give me like even a small patch of land, I'd want to grow things. I mean, it's very creative, right? I like cooking, I like baking. I feel like it's a science fair project you can eat. I mean, and so I would take these things that I would grow, and then after we used them, I would say I love growing sunflowers, and so I would bake some of the sunflower seeds and then also clean them up and create sunflower seed packets. Or say if we did pumpkin, I love Halloween. It's one of my favorite holidays of the year. It's like, we'd be like, well, I gotta say the pumpkin seeds, I mean, just things that you would eat, like apples. I mean, it sounds disgusting. I can't remember.
But what did people do with them? Was it like a nice little sort of art, that people were collecting, or was it where people actually planting them?
Like say tomato seeds, or they would plant them. Like that was at least the idea of why I was selling them. It wasn't sold for art. It was like, hey, be a farmer like me, a city farmer, or whatever.
That's amazing. Where did your story start? You're in DC now.
Yeah, I was born in DC, which is very unusual. I'm a native Washingtonian, so I was born here, up off of 16th Street, and grew up here. And then when Martin Luther King was assassinated and the riots, my parents moved to Southeast DC. And then as all the drug stuff happened, we moved out to Maryland for a bit. And then after that, when I lived all over the world and ended up back in DC, and in DC proper, because there's something about your hometown, right? You always end up gravitating back towards it. When we moved to Maryland, even as a kid, I was like, this isn't nothing against Maryland, but I'm from DC, So I was like, this isn't me. Like, I'm gonna move back to DC. Like, we can deal with all the others. We'll figure it out. But they were like, no, it's too dangerous.
Are your parents Washingtonians as well?
No. And to that point, I think I told my mom, since I used to sneak into DC all the time as a kid. She would drop me and my best friend at the library, and we would take buses to whatever, and end up right back in DC, hanging out for the day, and then making our way back. And I'm talking about young, I think I started that at 11 or 12.
This is like when you're supposed to be in school?
No, like say on the weekends, I would always have my mom drop me off at the library because I love the library. So that was true, and I would do some stuff. But then the reason why we were there all day was because we weren't there all day. We would then do some stuff, get out the books we wanted, blah, 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 and then go to the bus stop and catch a sequence of buses into DC.
I'm noticing a theme with Black geniuses. We love libraries. Everybody who's been on the show would get lost in the library as a kid.
Yeah, and one of the places I would also go would be a Library of Congress, which was the original Google. And even still now, I go there often. I still have my library card from they just was like, you still look the same. You can just keep using the same picture. So I've been using the same picture for like 20 something years.
Oh my God. And you spoke at the US Patent and Trade Office. I was, listening to your keynote again. We're going to come to that.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to come to that.
So I think it's really important, especially if you have kids, and I have like 10 godchildren, but I don't have kids, and I'll work with kids a lot, to let them explore, let them, what we say in element 7 of the Tribetan method is to practice, rehearse, experiment, try. And if I was constantly rehearsing and practicing, when I work with entrepreneurs, when they're like doing things, I'm like, be like Beyonce. She doesn't just hop up on stage and start flinging her arms around and singing.
She practices.
There's a lot of rehearsal in that. Yeah, practicing.
So is that the kind of childhood that you had? Did your mom encourage you to dream and explore?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wouldn't say so much that they pushed me to do it. I would say more that my parents didn't get in the way of me doing it.
Okay.
And so I was wired for this. At a very young age, I was pretty clear as to why I was here. And it was to create, like, I knew very early that I was going to see the world. I made it as a goal, 119 countries. I remember one time when we were watching TV and something came on, I think it was Paris. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go there. And my parents were like, oh, well, we can't, go take a trip there anytime soon. And I was like, oh, are you all coming with me? I think I'm just going by myself. Like it was like that, or like London. Like, I gotta get to London. And we had some false starts because of the race riots in the early 80s. So I didn't end up going until 87. But like 14, I was like, I gotta go to London. I gotta go. Like I gotta go. And my parents were like, well, if you save up half, we'll add half to it. And my father had a friend that lived in London at the time, so like, you and my best friend Linda, you all can go and stay with them. But then there were race riots and it got really bad, so it had to be canceled. So it was more like they didn't get in the way of my imagination, and they were supportive of it, especially my mom, because my grandparents had both been entrepreneurs, but I didn't really know that. They had died before I was born. So they saw those traits. She saw those traits in me that she had seen in her parents.
So how did you know what you were meant to do? You said you knew at a very young age. Talk about that.
It was just my interests and my imagination. Like a lot of children will gravitate towards certain things. And what we do, which I think it should be a crime, is we say to kids, be realistic, stop daydreaming, all those things. I'm like, daydream! And then write it down and tell me what you were dreaming about. Like, to me, I think it's more like that. I was reading the Vogue article on Simone Biles. Did you read that?
Not yet. Was
it Vogue or Vanity Fair? Anyway, one of them just did a cover story on her, and I highly recommend reading it because it's very up to date. So it's also her talking about handling quarantine and being separated from her family, because we think of these people that are exceptional, that they would just always have a gaggle of people around them and stuff, right? But she had just bought her first home, so she found this happening and had just broken up with her boyfriend. She said that she had been dating for 3 years. So found this happening when she was literally alone at home, and recounting that her life story in that space. So very reflective as a young person, right? And one thing she was talking about was how she was always jumping and flipping off of things. Like, so can you imagine if her parents were like, be careful, watch out?
Wow.
It's like many times we just need to get out of the way. Parents, cousins, sisters and brothers, society.
Wow. So what was there to gravitate towards as a child who was thinking about entrepreneurship and building a new
Yeah,
world?
I wouldn't necessarily say that I had the word entrepreneurship in my brain because it wasn't a common term. But I was like, I'm going to invent things. I'm going to create things. I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to run stuff. And I'm going to go to 119 countries and I'm going to lead. Said awkwardly, because I was also very introverted. But
Mm.
like, and so like say when all the video game stuff that came out, like I was very, very much into it. Zork was,
Yes. You said you would have been a gamer if you hadn't gone into
yeah, I would have been a professional gamer if it was now. And who knows, maybe someday I still will be.
What kind of games did you like to play?
Well, I did all the classics like Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Centipede,
Okay.
Centipede, and Asteroid. I also created some games because I had started coding, so I remember I'd create this game called the Black Box game where you like flicked a marble into the thing, and then how it came out, you had to determine where the pegs were in the box.
Oh my God.
And then like I got a Commodore 32 and then 64. And so by the time I was in middle school, I had my kit. Like I had my Commodore, I had an Okidata thermal jet printer. I would even like sometimes turn in my math homework as a printout from like this, like, and that you had to get the special thermal paper on a roll. And so this is where my parents would, it mattered because like say when I'm talking about all this technology and I want this, that, they weren't like get away with that nonsense. They would give
Buy
it
you what you
for
wanted.
birthday or Christmas, not just on a whim. Or like say the Okidata thermal jet printer, the paper came on this roll and it was there wasn't any Google or anything. This is the 70s, okay, like to give you context. So we would late 70s, like maybe 1980, my dad would have to drive me 45 minutes away to go to this special supply store because it was like only companies would have stuff like that to buy these rolls of paper to go in my printer. And everything about it was just so fascinating because there wasn't WYSIWYG. So if you were doing a document, you didn't know until it printed out what was going to print out because you had to code in the document.
Wow. So all of that through your childhood, gravitating towards invention and technology, and then you go to Cornell, you do electrical engineering. And talk about your time at Cornell. You said that you did you were part of the first entrepreneurship cohort. You had at this time, it was at Cornell that you did the whole backpack patent, right? You did the time in London. How did you end up from there going to WorldSpace?
Yeah, so let's backtrack one bit because in high school I started my first real company, although it wasn't incorporated, but it was a ticket selling business, right? And which was legal in DC and Maryland as long as you sold from your home versus the venue. So it brought together all these interests that I had around music because most of the money I spent was on concerts and I was a musician. So
what kind of concerts did you like to go to?
So like it ranged. So I really loved Rush because Geddy Lee was he was such like Tom Sawyer. That song and that bass line was like one of my favorite bass lines of all time. So I saw that. I saw the Police and Billy Idol. I was in a hardcore band, Meager Zombies. I know some I don't think I ever talked about that.
Say the name of the band again. I think you mentioned it to me once.
Meager Zombies.
Meager Zombies.
Yeah. So I was into all the hardcore stuff. And then also like when I was a kid, I loved all the soul. So like the Jackson 5, Michael Jackson, then when he went into pop. I loved Elton John. I Prince was the ultimate for me, and went to see Purple Rain. Just a lot of a wide variety of stuff, including like Andrea Bocelli. Like I was a musician. So in high school, I was also the assistant conductor of the high school orchestra, and the lead saxophonist, tenor saxophonist. So like I played flute, violin, like I just loved music, and there's a lot of science in music. And when I was going to university, I was debating like between, do I also sort of minor in music and some other things. So, you know, I start this ticket business with my best friend, and we were like, say with the Thriller concert, we might have cleared $3,000 in the 80s.
Wow.
That was a lot of money. Wow. With Purple Rain, it was the same way. And to give you a sense of how much that was, floor seats, because my dad held me hostage to making sure to take him to that concert. And I was like, Dad, you know, that's $300, you know, whatever. But we went. It was one of our best experiences ever. And the floor seats that we had, which were maybe in the 15th row, you know what I mean, like really awesome seats, were $13 each. I still have those tickets.
Oh my God.
So if you imagine, and I would say minimum wage was like maybe $4 or $5. I mean, like it was a long time ago. So as a teenager, to be clearing a few $1,000 per event. So that, and it helped me pay for a lot of things. The other thing I want to note about before I went to Cornell is I first taught myself to code out of books, because remember, there's no Google or anything. Out of books with like paper and pencil, you know, getting stuff from the library, and then practicing with it on my Commodore, right? That level of commitment and determination and diligence, even with something as techy as that, got me accepted into Cornell College of Engineering, electrical engineering major, because you had to declare your major. Okay. I know other people that have taught themselves. A friend of mine who had spent, you know, time, he was in prison, and he was in prison for like 20 something years.
Oh my God.
Something years, he had taught himself to code using books, paper, and pencil. And when he got out a few years ago, he started a tech company. So I also want to make sure that, and we first met and connected because when he heard about what I was doing the Tribetan method, he was like, oh my God, that's what I did when I was incarcerated.
Wow.
It's like all the same stuff. So I also want to make sure people know that the creative power that they have within themselves to keep, to make things real that they want, if they don't stop with it. It's just like that guy recently who got into Harvard Law School, who was first rejected. I don't know if you saw the news. It was all over in the US press. But he had applied to university, first got rejected, eventually ended up at University of Maryland, but his ultimate dream was Harvard Law School. He worked his way through University of Maryland as a trash collector, and recently just got accepted to Harvard Law School. Those are real stories. That's my stories. Like you're very ordinary until you do something extraordinary. I'm an ordinary person that periodically did extraordinary things.
When did you decide you wanted to learn to code? Do you remember the spark or the moment where you were like, okay, I'm going to learn how to code? And then I also want to know if it was easy for you to choose your major.
I can't remember the specific moment. I just remember that technology and science were always of interest to me. And my parents didn't get in the way of it. They were supportive of it. Society, though, got in the way of it all the time.
How so?
Well, I mean, when I was a kid, women couldn't even have their own bank account. Like I was the first of my family to be born with all of my civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
Like the racism and the sexism, the N word, the B word, the C word, the N word being thrown at me even as a child, you know, all the time, and there was no hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like relentless attack. If I did something really well, the first thing, many times the first thing I would get would be someone trying to punch me out of the sky, including family, you know, because the sexism part is a real dynamic too. We see both sort of coming to a head with the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement, but that was real life for all of us back then, all the time.
Wow. So I want us to get into the Tribetan method.
And now, I say back then, and now, you get so
it's real, it's stage real, but this is the age of Black women, hunty. We about to take over everything. We're already taking over everything, so I'm here for it.
Can I say that I declared the age of the Black woman in 2014?
You did?
Even that hashtag where I would do that to my friend Adora, and she's a journalist, so she'd be like, "What are you talking?" I was like, "Let's see. It's the coming of the age of the Black woman in the next 5 to 7 years."
What made you make that declaration?
I was meditating, and it just came out that the age of the Black woman is coming. Just like Tribetan, I was meditating, and it was after my brother had passed away in 2012, and I started it on Halloween 2012, even though I had a tech company for 12 years. And just that voice of God that's in me that was like, you need to do this, you need to do this now, because something, I won't say exactly what the vision was, but that very difficult times are coming, and this is important. And it was a huge leap of faith, because this was 2012.
Yeah.
I mean, it was still the golden years. And our company had just survived the recession. So it was so much easier just to stay where I was, because that was such a battle. And our company was 11 years old. So it was no longer a startup. It was, you know, having a regular job at a company that you founded. You know what I mean? And my brother had died, and whatever. So I could have used the break, but I heard that voice and that calling that I've listened to since I was a kid. And I was like, but things are great, and we have this whole reserve, and I'm tired. And it's like, you know, it's right now.
It is real. The exhaustion is
things
real.
are coming, and you need to be ready, and this will be totally different. You're going to need to speak, because I pretty much hidden myself. I would speak publicly, but more about technology or a product versus about me personally. And then, by 2015, it was very obvious that the voice, which is always right, was right.
So let's go back to Cornell and to WorldSpace, because we have 20 minutes left, and I know people want to hear about how you raised the $670 million for WorldSpace, and you know, you've worked on a number of tech ventures since then, and then you came to found Tribetan. So let's go through that journey a bit, so that we can talk, you know, about some of the things that you've learned in your journey that you think all entrepreneurs should master, and how we can start that process.
Yeah, definitely. So the reason why I wanted to add the ticket business is that when you then move forward with WorldSpace, so music's always played a role for me in my life. You know, I'd already done a company that was being distributed a product, you know, the backpack company that had been distributed in 50 different retail locations. So we had to do manufacturing.
We have to do episodes on each business.
We had to do manufacturing and inventory and raising money and promotion data. And this was before, you know, like this was in the late 80s. So you didn't even really have fulfillment and like third-party organizations that you could rely on. So we had a call center, we had inventory, we did shipping, you know, and I was the president of the company. So even though it was a smaller practice, it's all that practicing, right? Then, you know, musician and music. And then I had worked in the city in London, doing sales and like portfolio and settlement, like so risk portfolio management and settlements for a fixed income derivative, and had worked on Wall Street doing sales and trading. So that was my other passion. Like it's very entrepreneurial to do sales and trading. And so then fast forward with WorldSpace, I was back home in DC and met Noah, who had this idea. I'd seen some blurb and something, I don't know which paper it was or magazine, but I cut it out because that's what you do then. So I cut it out and saved it. And I was living in New York City. I was like, let me find this guy, called 411, found his number, the operator gave me his number, and I called him and I said, that idea that you have about digital radio, I'm liking it. Like, and the article was about the delivering, you know, radio and content over satellite, having the licenses and that type of stuff, right? So it's more technical. I remember it being more technical. So he was like, sure, like I'd love to meet up with you. So when I was in DC, met up with him and we were talking, and it was just the same, all these things I'd been dreaming around, connecting the world. By then I'd already lived in Tokyo and London and had been to Venezuela, which is a whole other story because I was there during Chavez, and all throughout Europe. And so I'd already like traveled to 3 different continents and lived in a variety of places, and was very passionate about connecting the world. And so when he was talking to me about it, I was like, yeah, how much do you need to do this? And he's like, about $1 billion. And I was like, without even pausing,
Okay.
I was like, okay, let me see what I can do. I was 26, I think, then when I met him. By the time I raised it, I was 27 or 28. And Noah and I have talked about that a lot since that. What's even more amazing is like, okay, cool. Like, what do you need from me? You're like, I look like a kid. Like, I look young now. Like, when I was 20 something, I would have kids and guys in bicycles outside of a middle school ask me out to, like, if I wanted to share lunch break with them. And I was like, dude, I'm way beyond you on lunch break. I was like, I'm old enough to be your mother, right?
Oh my God.
So the fact that Noah would also take it seriously, and we've talked about it, and he was like, I was praying for some sort of miracle. It had been 2 years. I was about to give up. I was like, God, I need an angel. And I was at that point not choosy as to what form my angel came in. Like, basically, one time you have to have Noah on the show.
Okay.
To talk about it. But yeah, and so I went back to New York City, and I was like, oh, how am I going to do this? You know, it was very daunting. But essentially, I had gotten to that I didn't have to do it, but we were going to do it, right?
Okay.
So my faith, like God had me do so many amazing things already, just for anyone. Like I'm like the cute Black female version of Forrest Gump. And like would find myself into all these amazing, doing all these.
That was the best movie ever, by the way.
It was
best movie ever.
Like, you know, like I'd already was managing, as a teenager on summer break, I'd go to London and manage the risk exposure and settlements for a fixed income derivative trading desk. And then they would have me back summer. And the person who did it, before me was 34. I was the youngest person that they had ever had do it, the first female, the first Black. And so it was just like one thing, I'd moved to Tokyo on my own. And so by then I was like, God, let's do this. Like we can do, like, show me the way. Just show me the way, I'll do it. And it was just one story after another told, and one believer after another joining the tribe. And then it got done. And I'll tell you, like with the storytelling was just so important, like being able to tell stories, like what you do, what your team does, but everyone needs to be able to do it as a skill set, because we live in a narrative-based reality. He or she who tells, controls, distribute the story, tells, control, and distributes reality itself. So that was another awareness that I had coming out of Cornell, the backpack especially. So we had to do so much storytelling with it. Filing for a patent is a form of storytelling. Coding is a form of precise storytelling. And so, I at one point had ended up taking improv classes even because I recognized it. And because entrepreneurship wasn't a thing back then, it was great. On the one hand, people were just like, get a real job. Like, no, 30 under 30, all that stuff just for an idea, forget it. Like even raising the money, people were still like, then build the satellites. Even launching the satellites, it's like, well, then sell the receivers. Like you just got no reverence for anything. So the people in it were in it because it mattered to them. But like going back to the storytelling, like I recognized that. And that was something that I had that was different from Noah, even though he was much older than me. Was that I'd already been an entrepreneur. I was deep into the music space. We were launching 3 satellites. I'd lived and visited and or worked in North America, Europe, South America, and Asia, right? I raised money before, although a much smaller amount of money. And I had run a company that was a physical company that had to deal with hardware and distribution and partners and inventory and customer service and marketing and da-da-da. So when I came into it and started talking to people, whereas he was talking about the technology, and he was a regulatory lawyer, specifically would talk a lot about the licenses, like we have these licenses versus what it could do. I created a story around it that was more, look, we're going to launch 3 satellites that's going to cover every country on Earth. And when we're done, the world will be able to speak to the world. And I'm not talking about politicians or governments. I'm talking about you and me. We're going to be able to talk to each other in the form of videos and TV shows and news and entertainment and sports. And by the time we're done, the world will never be the same, And that story in some form, refined over and over again, told over and over again, eventually the believers came. And also, the questions would come like, well, we're not going to build ourselves. Alcatel's going to be our general contractor. Is Alcatel interested in investing? Oh, hold on. Let me talk to them more deeply about if I get Alcatel to agree to do vendor financing and be the cornerstone of the raise, would you all then, would that be of interest to you? Yes. So then flying over to Toulouse, like first speaking to Jean-Francois Gambert, I still remember all these guys, and then flying over to Toulouse, and then they eventually, start coming to the meetings, and then they formally agree to do it. It's just, like one story at a time, that storytelling. I'll sort of finish off that part of it by saying, you know, that philosophical question where they asked, did the tree make a sound when it fell in the forest if no one was there to hear it? That doesn't matter. Like, that's not the question. The question is, did the tree make a sound or exist at all if no one tells the story of it? Right? Or what if it fell, you chopped it down yourself, right? You come out of the woods and people are like, did a tree fall? No, I was in the woods, nothing fell. What's the reality? The story is the reality, right? That's how important persuasive storytelling is, you know. And so I always like to say that, you know, with entrepreneurs or innovators or anyone trying to convince someone to do something, it's not a pitch, it's a persuasive narrative.
There are so many questions for you in the chat, and I still have lots of questions.
If you're open to go over a bit. I'm open.
I want to know from you. I want to know from those of you guys who are watching. I'm going to shout out Ayo, Dele, of course, our Uzo and our Kirsten backstage holding things down. Appreciate you, ladies. Nadine is watching. Alex Sado, our AI partner. You got to meet him. And then we have Ayo Deji watching. So I'm going to get to you guys' questions. I want you to talk, Tiffany, a little bit more about the storytelling and how to, you know, clearly people have to register for a whole workshop with you to get, you know, to get the full tea. But I want you, because we, you know, from you and I started
talking. You want to sip the tea right now, right?
Huh?
I said, you want to sip the tea, right? You want to sip
the tea, but I just want to quickly say how, you know, from the time you and I started speaking and you kind of gave me this confidence to embrace my imagination and just embrace the dream, like just dream all out and not be, you know, there was a lot of, with founders, I think generally, and women, there's a lot of like hesitation and fear around these big things that we want to do. And you were just very much like, embrace the dream fully, imagine fully, and sell the dream. And so we started selling the dream.
To take action, right? Because you wanted to wait, because that's what so many people do.
But even just the way that we describe the organization, you know, as we were like recruiting, we have, you know, some interns from Columbia that I told you about, and we'd gotten so many other people just kind of interested in the organization. And I feel like a lot of that started with us just kind of reframing who we are, not around like the platform that we're building, but the world that we're delivering, right? And so that is what you talk about with storytelling, and, you know, how entrepreneurs should be utilizing storytelling to gain support. So talk a bit more about that and what you teach at Tribetan.
Yes, definitely. So the third element is tell your story, and it focuses on both, you know, who and where and how much you should tell your story, but also how to tell a persuasive story. And I do remember when we first spoke, where there was so much hesitation, especially with the pandemic, and you were doing a live thing. And we spent a lot of time talking about that in our first two Zooms. And then from that, you really took off. And this is, you know, a part of what's come out of it. And it's really exciting. And I remember, you know, at one point saying to you, watch and see, like, things will happen in such a miraculous way, like one person at a time and one story at a time in so many words. And it's the case, because there is also this desire to wait and to be resistant, whether there's a pandemic or not. And really the first step with anything, even with something as outrageous as building and launching satellites, is the story. And all of us can take that first step. Like, work on the story and then tell it to one other person. Work on the story again and then tell it to one other person. And really, miracles happen through other people. So, for example, if I was to give a 60-second or 90-second or 3-minute version of the persuasive storytelling, I would say the main components are the content should include conviction, objectivity, and grace. So conviction is a language and action and tone showing that it's important to you, that it matters to you. You may say, well, why does that matter? It matters because anyone that knows anything about anything knows that you're going to be walking through a lot of fire. A lot of people give up, and if they're going to give you money or time or resources or mentorship, they want to know that you're in it for the long haul. It's, statements, declarative statements like, I will do this versus I'm thinking, I feel like I might do whatever. It's like, well, when you know, come back to me, right? Okay, so it's also in how you talk and how you project, but very authentically, like it's being yourself. So everything I give is a framework to make your own. Okay, so conviction, objectivity, and grace. Objectivity is showing that it's not just your passion, it's also rooted in reality, rooted in the market. So it's prototypes, it's requirements documents, it's market data, it's those types of things, right? Something objective. And then grace is showing that's of interest and value to another person, either providing delight or providing a solution to a problem, so much so that they would pay for it. Donations, purchases, right? So those are case studies, testimonials, maybe your client actually joining you in something, right? Like say Alcatel with both version of objectivity as well as grace, because they also deal with so many subcontractors and that general market. So, so if you have the components of conviction, objectivity, and grace in your story, you're set. You want to start off with the conviction and grace, actually, so that people are connected to what you're talking about, so that they even care about the objectivity. So like for me with my story, the conviction, well, all the stuff with music, all my traveling, and wanting to unite the world in the 119 countries and and being able to talk about my friends, in Tokyo and what was going on in Venezuela at the time, and all the stuff in Europe and the world that I grew up in post Jim Crow United States. Also, and that mattered to me. It was obvious the way I talked about the fact that I was talking about how it was going to change so many lives, and that we live in this narrative-based reality. So, if you don't think the story matters, well, I've been to places where, in authoritarian states, where the first thing they do is control the story, like what Chavez is doing with Venezuela. If you don't think it matters, then why do they do that? What's also, happening now in my country and other places around the world, like that is a big, big red flag for me, having literally risked my life to have open storytelling happen around the world. So, you start with the conviction and the grace, and then you bring in the objectivity enough to show its reality. Most of the objectivity will come out in Q&A. So you have the answers to the questions. You don't want to be talking about the broadcast licenses and the regulatory issues as much in that first story. You want them to first care tremendously, right? Then you tell the story to everyone and anyone, not just at pitch contests or conferences, but in the grocery store, at their
taxi driver.
Taxi driver.
I had a long taxi ride in Boston one time, and I was just telling this guy about the vision, and I was like, "This is Tiffany."
Yeah. And so you just keep telling the story everywhere and anywhere: friends, family, text, email, podcast. It doesn't matter. You got to keep telling it. And for me, as a Black woman, so at the time when I was telling, I was young. So there was ageism, there was racism, and there was sexism. So say if someone might have had to tell a story to get the same results 500 times, I might have had to tell it 5,000 times. Okay, so what? Like, I can tell you on the back end of all these amazing things that I've done that I'm still really, really happy to do it all again, even with people making it so hard for me and being punched out of the sky. The punching out of the sky thing, I'm still not done with that yet because I'm a patient girl. So, and times have changed tremendously. So, you may see an open letter coming from me very soon.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. I realized that we didn't hit the punchline with the 670, because I remember you telling you've given this speech so many times. And so I just want to quickly make sure everybody understands how you kind of finally sealed the deal. Because you were working at, was it Goldman Sachs? You were working at one of the banks at the time?
Yeah. No, I was at Morgan Stanley at the time, but doing sales and trading. But I did have the ability to do business development for investment banking. When I was pitching this, like everyone, my manager and others were like, oh, that's a lot. That's sort of great. We don't understand. But one thing led to another with the storytelling. And I got a chance to tell the story to the global head of investment banking at Morgan Stanley at the time. And it was an intense conversation between the two of us in his office. But we moved through it, and then also got Alcatel. And then, there was some other hurdles that came up, but would just address each hurdle as it came. And every time a hurdle came, I would talk to a lot of people about it. Friends, I would talk to other people at the bank. I would talk to knowing them about it. I would talk to people back at Cornell about, there's just something about talking out almost anything.
Vulnerability.
That allows you to solve it. Well, it's both vulnerability and it's the mastermind. Because I would read a lot, and I still do read a lot, hence the library. Because to me, the answer to everything is in someone's imagination, either someone that's alive right now or had been alive in the past.
Oh, Lord. Okay. So you got the global head.
Questions?
No, I'm going to go to the questions now. I want to close that part out. We got to do a part 2 because I have 2,000 more questions. But okay. So you guys understand what happened. I want to know what you're thinking so far. Thank you for everybody that's commenting. Drop some thoughts, drop some more questions. I'm going to run through from the top. So I think the first question was from Raquel. And then Uzo wants to know your beauty secret, because you said that, it's aligned with living your purpose. And then Raquel asked, how did you find a community of Black women in STEM and in business as you went through degrees and your early career? Who are the Black women that you look up to?
So I'm just finding them now. I didn't have anyone then. I didn't have a lot of, say, for example, Katherine Johnson. I found out about her when everyone else did, or maybe a few years before because of, Obama gave her the award. But I didn't know it while I was watching the actual launch myself as a little girl, being I'd wanted to be an astronaut. And I'm a person who built and launched things into space. I sometimes, when I watched Hidden Figures, I cried so much for 3 reasons. One, just how they were treated, and it reminded me of so many things. I think every Black person of a certain age has PTSD from just how they were treated. Secondly, I cried because I'm it would have been really helpful for me to have known her, right? For all the things I was doing.
Known about her.
But to know her personally. I'm sure. And she was not too far from DC because she was down, I think, in Richmond, Virginia or something. And so I cried for that because that would have probably, just to have someone who understood, because my family didn't understand. My mom probably still doesn't fully understand no one really understands what I went through. It happened in rooms that I and basically a bunch of older men were present, and there wasn't social media and there weren't smartphones. So, I went through so much and was able to go through it because of my faith. Like, I knew my faith was going to be a secret sauce. But unfortunately, most of the women and Black women in STEM that I'm connecting to, it's just been over the past few years. There wasn't really anyone that I was aware of then. There wasn't Google. So I was truly on my own. Someone has said, I'm hoping this is not the case, but that I am, of my generation, the only Black female tech entrepreneur in the world that was successful with it.
Wow.
People that have started since, so as in starting in the 70s and the 80s. And I've been looking for her.
There has to be at least one out there. Maybe they stressed her out so much that she just, turned a corner. But if you're out there, if you're watching and you are a Black woman entrepreneur back in the 90s and you did your thing, Tiffany's looking for you. Get in touch.
I'm looking for you, yeah.
What's your beauty secret? In addition to doing your living your purpose?
That's a longer story, because I had this thesis on aging, that we don't age the way we think we age, like what's aging is not. And so I tested that thesis, and so it's a whole portfolio of habits that go around that thesis, and we would have to talk about something.
Okay, that sounds like a book. Okay.
Yeah. But the key, but if I had to tell you some of the main is sweat a lot, drink a lot of water, and use sunscreen. There's a lot of other stuff that goes with it. But if I had to give you like Pareto, like 3 things that would make a huge difference.
I love it. Ayo asks, what about erecting a business idea that the country isn't ready for, like postpartum support for mothers before the 6 weeks they have their wellness check? So she's talking about maternal health and getting inspired to insert yourself in a space where others are not welcoming and not ready.
So don't worry about if people are welcoming and ready. Like, I rarely worried about that. Be ready for the suffering. Just consider it something that comes with the territory. Like, why should it be a nice, easy ride? Like, there's always a price to pay for everything. You order something from Amazon, they want your credit card, right? Like, if you want to change the world, you're going to have to suffer a bit. So be it. So don't worry so much about whether the world is ready or accepting of it. Instead, focus on what is that vision? What is it that you're imagining? And try to start describing it to other people so that you can create a story around it. And then one person after another, eventually you'll find someone, like believers, sort of one believer at a time, that will help you out with it.
Absolutely. And I just want to tell you, Ayo, write an article, draft something about your dream, and we'll publish it. Send it to us at NorPress. Yes. We gotta start dreaming out loud, dreaming on paper. So anybody else who's out there with a dream and you're trying to figure out how to work through it, write it down, share the dream with us, and we'll publish it, start putting it out there. The universe is waiting for your dreams to be, be defined.
And if that seems daunting to publish it, like, there's so many steps before that, which is writing it down and texting it to 3 of your close friends. Like, every time you tell the story, you get that closer to making it a reality. Because there has been times where I've told it to someone at a cocktail party, and that story left the room and went viral in the analog, and then next thing, so-and-so's and so-and-so's cousin works at the company that would be a perfect customer for the idea that I have, and they reach out to me. This actually just happened to me. It was via church.
Wow.
Like, my pastor mentioned something to someone, and they are in like a innovating education platform space, and they reached out to me, and they were like, Pastor so-and-so was telling us about what you do. Can we have a meeting with our product development people? So just start telling the story. And if you want to publish it at some point, great, but just start.
So you just completed a program with Yale Sci-City, with, very special place for me because they were super supportive of Northwest Nor Labs. And I want you to just quickly touch on what you were, what you're most impressed about with entrepreneurs that you're seeing today, and what you taught the entrepreneurs at Yale, what you want anybody who's watching to. You've talked about, embrace the struggle, embrace the suffering, tell your story. Is there anything else that you want to leave with entrepreneurs that you think is so essential?
Yeah, so first off, you were the one that goes to telling the story, right? Like, I get a random email from Yale asking if I would teach and be a part of their summer program because Lalade had told them about it.
I was like, you need to hire this woman right now.
So this is yet another example of the power of storytelling. I mean, how much harder would it have been? And I didn't know. I didn't ask her to do that. It just the email randomly came to me. So thank you. And I loved it. The cohort is fantastic. I adore them. And I'm still engaging with a lot of the founders, basically on the same sort of stuff that we did and that we're talking about today. One thing that's so impressive to me about today's founders and innovators and change makers is that they are change makers, right? So back when I was doing entrepreneurship, so much of it, not me, like I was always had this combination of impact and changing the world and making money. Like I felt like you can do both. You don't have to, like I knew I wanted to be a servant leader because of my faith in a time where that wasn't as popular. And I was doing Wall Street and all these other things where it was more like that hierarchical leadership model, like authoritarian, almost, like winner takes all, money, right? At all costs. And so what impresses me the most about entrepreneurs now, that many of them aspire to be change makers, like the woman who asked the question, that they care about impact, that they have a lot of grace, that there's this whole thing around social entrepreneurship, which for me, like in the future, I just want all companies to be that way. Like I don't want it to be delineated. I want all companies to have a triple bottom line. Like double isn't even enough for me. And when I say triple, the third part are the people. So it's like they talk about money and then the impact, but then I feel like it should be equally a bottom line around the people, your team, your customers, your partner, like how people are treated. And if you're treating people like crap, but then you're making money when you're still bankrupt in some way.
Oh my God, we didn't get into the power of we. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna ask my last question because it's 4:15 almost. So liberation. And when I ask you the question about liberation, you say you've always been liberated, even though you were the first person in your family born with all your rights. So let's talk about liberation. Let's talk about what liberation means to you, I want to ask you what you would do with a blank check, but I feel like you've already done it. So I don't know.
No, give me a blank check. There's like I
okay, Beyonce, we calling you. We calling you.
I feel like, have you seen Hamilton yet?
I just saw it last night with my team. It was amazing.
Yeah, and so I won't be a spoiler, but it like goes to, for me, for the list of dreams that I have, some of them I've been carrying since I was a kid. I'm always adding new ones to the list, right? There's never enough time, right? Because I want to create stuff, so there's never enough time, enough people, enough resources, because I literally want to reimagine everything and create new realities in the world. And so I'll say it starts with mindset in the mind. So we'll go back to where we began. And when you were saying about liberation, it's like well, really the only thing that has to ever be liberated is your mind. And I did that at such a young age and had been so aggressive and assertive about letting no one take ownership of it that liberation isn't even a thing for me, right? Like I feel, and I also, say Juneteenth got a lot more attention this year than it ever did around the world. And, the story of Juneteenth, I feel is told by an unliberated, like the way the story is told in an unliberated way. The way I have studied, the story and the story that I hold is that, like the Emancipation Proclamation, I do so many contracts, right? If you read it, there's all these carve-outs. It was really a declaration of intent to, especially Blacks, freed Blacks, to join the Union Army and to fight for the liberation of the slaves, right? Because they were probably saying, yeah, we're going to liberate, remove slavery and da-da-da. But, the Blacks were like, you guys aren't good for keeping your word, so we need something, right? Maybe not yet the 13th Amendment, but something, and we need it, and it needed to be done fast, and we know executive order is the fastest thing to do as a president. So he does this, and the first of the year, but it was just, the Emancipation Proclamation was just freeing the slaves in the Confederacy. There were no slaves in the Union, and there were carve-outs for various parishes that were strategic strongholds and collaborators with the Union Army. So if you were in those, basically, if you were a friend of the Union, you could still keep your slaves. But if you were, on the fighting side, all those slaves were declared free. So if they won the fights against them, those slaves would be immediately free. So about 200,000 Blacks ended up joining the Union Army and fighting for the freedom of the slaves. There was a second, migration, right, to Texas, because as each state was dropping, people would flee further and further west. I mean, it's hard to get to Texas now, even with flight. Like back then, they thought they were good, right? But eventually the war, right? Eventually the war came to them, and Texas fell, and that proclamation, and that General Order number 3, I think it was called, was read. And I always think about, there were quite a few people who were in that audience listening to that story being told, but had already liberated themselves in their imagination before the trigger was pulled. They knew it was, like, it's made out to be like they had no idea. Well, many of them had to travel from Florida to Texas as people were fleeing west. These, these people that owned them. Wow. And after that, after Juneteenth, what's not told, what is really the story, is Reformation. There are people who in their lifetime were slaves that had also run for office, filed, really radical progressive legislation, sued their slave owners, started business, the same individual in the same lifetime, right? Which meant that they were liberated before Juneteenth. They had been imagining all the things that they were in that audience listening to Order number 3 saying, ready, let's do it. I've been waiting for this my whole life, right? There were others that weren't, but even in the context of slavery, there were liberated minds and there were those that weren't. So when you talk about Black liberation, I go right back to your mind, your imagination, the simulator that I'm releasing Friday, that it has been released, but the next version of it, the alpha has been released and used. The beta will be released on Friday. Interestingly enough, a partner at a big firm in the UK will be the first to do it.
Ooh, we're going to do it. Our NARLab team is doing it, so we got to set that up.
I'll give you guys a link to join the waitlist for it, because I'm still working out the bugs, but it's called, right now the working title is MSIS, and it's Mindset Simulator, Imagination Stimulator. And the whole thing is going through this experience that's about 90 minutes to 2 hours that, frees your mind.
Wow. Okay. We have to end there. This has been amazing. I hope all of you guys watching agree. Thank you for all your comments and questions. Subscribe.
Okay,
subscribe.
I'm on Instagram at Tiffany Norwood, and on Twitter at Tiffany Norwood, and LinkedIn Tiffany Norwood. I don't know what my handle is for LinkedIn.
Yeah, you guys make sure to go check out Tiffany's social media and go to the website, because even the Tribetan website gives you like a whole lot of information about how you can think about and watch some of her videos. She's on a number of podcasts and keynotes. So she has tons of videos on YouTube. Definitely go and check out her work, and we'll definitely bring her back. We're going to be writing about her on NordPress. Going to be keeping track of her next moves. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share this video. You are the movement. You are the future. You're the dream. So this is the story that we want to push out into the world. So it starts with you guys. Share this video with 5 people. Stay connected with us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and let us know what else you want to see, who you think we should interview. And we're going to be having, some other events coming up. So stay close and make sure you also join our newsletter, nordpress.org. Love you guys. Eat your greens, take your vitamins, get some vitamin D, spend time in the sun, create, imagine, dream, Black dream on everything.
And I'm really excited to see what y'all create out of this.
Yes. All right. Take it easy, guys. Love you.